What's going on, guys? Today I'll be starting to work on my rear fenders. So yes, it is time to finally start working on the rear end of this car. So as you may know, I've done a lot to the front end of this car, doing the custom headlight setup, the tubular front bumper, I've pushed the fenders out, but the back end really doesn't match, and I really haven't done that much to the back end. The main thing I've done is the custom wing, which I really like how that came out, but the rest of it is pretty stock. I mean, stock taillights, stock body lines, of course. What's really gonna transform the back end of this car and make it match the front end is gonna be some custom fenders back here. Today's gonna be a little bit more of a prep day, kind of getting the rear end ready for some custom fenders. When I do air out completely, the fender just rests on the top of the tire. So clearly I need some more width back here. So what we're gonna do is actually cut this out, and then the new fender that goes over top will be out a bit further, and that'll give the look that I'm looking for and the clearance for the tire that we need. The basic concept is we're gonna be cutting out some of this fender. But because it is a unibody car, that's actually a pretty big structural point of the car where the inner fender and like the outer skin of the car come together in a pinch. So if you do just cut it out and leave it, you're kind of losing a lot of the rigidity of the car itself, and it's not the best thing to do. So what we're gonna do is cut it out, but then we're gonna actually re-weld those two pieces back together, and it'll make a little bit more sense once I do cut this away and you can see the two pieces of sheet metal that will need to be re-welded. First off, I'll probably tape off this area, and then I'll start marking exactly where I want to cut. And I'm thinking probably a couple inches at the top and then taper back into the original lines there. So do that on both sides, kind of start like out here and then come up probably to this line at least to give me a little bit more clearance. Once I get that cut, then I'll really look at what I'm dealing with as far as where the sheet metal is going to line up, the inner and the outer. From there, I'll have to take off any paint in the areas where I'm gonna be welding. Once I get it all welded up, the last thing I'll do is gonna be painting it just to prevent any rust. It's not gonna be something you're gonna see, but you definitely don't wanna leave it bare metal with the bare welds because it will rust. So that's the basic process, and now we'll get started. Here's where I'm at right now. I'll go through exactly what I just did. First off, I cut about a 1/2 inch in, which is this, the whole way around the arch. And I went the whole way through both pieces of sheet metal. And that's to get rid of the portion where they're actually bonded together. And then next I cut on the line that I drew. But for that cut, I actually just went through the first layer of sheet metal. And that's pretty important because you want to keep the bottom layer sheet metal a little longer, because what we're gonna do is actually pinch these together and then weld them. And if you cut this the whole way through, then you won't have enough material to bring it up and then contact the outer layer to weld. And what I just did was some slots here, and that's gonna make it a lot easier to pound these up into shape to bend that inner sheet metal to the outer. But before I do that, I am going to go through here with a wire wheel and clean off all the paint on the inner and the outer wherever I'm gonna weld. And once I get that done, then I will be hitting this with probably a rubber mallet to get that nice and close to the outer sheet metal, and then I can start welding. I've now got the passenger side completely welded up. It went pretty well. I ended up using my MIG welder. And when you're doing this, you're really just trying to stitch it together. You can't really go for like a long bead weld because the material is very thin. So if you try to do a long weld, you're just gonna heat it up too much and blow right through. So I just used the MIG welder and just kind of stitched it. You just do a little bit at a time. Not going for perfect welds here, you're just trying to get a good connection and just make sure you have some decent penetration in both sides without blowing the whole way through. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use some of this. I picked this up. This is liquid metal filler. So it's basically an adhesive sealant that's meant for metal, and it dries very hard, so it should give actually some decent strength. And I'm gonna use that underneath here. You can see where all those slits were that I cut so that I could bend the metal. So you wanna seal that up so water doesn't go in there and then start to rust stuff out. And it's also nice to use this strong adhesive because then that's one more level of strength that you're gonna add to this. And then if there's any more gaps like on the top here, I'll just fill all that in. And once I'm done with that, I'm gonna head over to the driver's side and do it all again.
I've got everything finished up and painted now, and this really turned out pretty nice. I ended up using that metal gap filler, and I went the whole way around on the top where the welds are, just to seal up everything, make sure there were no holes. Again, I was stitch welding it, so you know the weld probably wasn't a perfect seal. And then between all of those flaps that I cut, there was a gap, so I filled that on the top, and then underneath I filled all those gaps as well. So that made a pretty nice finish. Over here you can probably see a little bit better underneath. So you can see all of those flaps that I cut, but then in between there I filled all of the gaps in with that metal filler. And then I ended up just doing some primer and then some just regular spray paint over top of that. It actually ended up matching the body decently. Not like this is really for looks, that's just to prevent any rust from happening and protect the metal. I ended up cutting out about 2¼ inches here on the top portion, and then I tapered it down. I think it was about 1.5 inches in this section, and then tapered down to the stock line there. Same thing on the backside. The backside you are limited because this is where the rear bumper comes in. So I did not want to cut into the rear bumper because I'm thinking my new over fender might stop right at this line. So I wanted to leave the rear bumper untouched, so I came in right there. But judging by my tire size and where my wheels were sitting, that should be enough clearance so that I can tuck the wheel and tire up into the wheel well. So now this car is ready for some over fenders. There's no going back now. I've got this fully cut out. There's no way I can go back to the stock body lines. And before I get any comments that I ruined the car, remember this car was in a junkyard. The front subframe was bent. It had no bumper and fender, and the whole car was a little screwed up. So it's not like I'm ruining a perfect pristine car here with cutting out this wheel arch. I'm just trying to create something custom. So that's it for today. Hopefully that helps you if you are looking to do this on your car. The process will be exactly the same for any car that is a unibody, which is most cars, you know, from the 90s to today. So any car that you want to lower a lot in the rear and maybe go a little wider as well, you'll need to do something like this. And this kind of shows you the right way to do it without losing any rigidity in the body of the car. So next time I will start working on the new over fenders. I'll admit I don't know exactly what I'm doing yet. I have a lot of ideas, but it should get interesting, and I'm really excited for the new look of this car.